In my meditation practice, it's important not to strive for a specific target, but just to open myself up and face up the thoughts that have come, whether they're good or bad, and repeat my mantra with a free mental attitude. Would the same apply to open myself up for God consciousness? Okay, so basically what the question is when I'm meditating, it's important for me not to have a specific goal or target, but just to be open. If I'm striving for God consciousness, is it the same thing? Should I have a goal? Should I have a target? Or should I just be open? Well, we always should have a goal. And the reason that we always should have a goal is, even in meditation, even if we're not striving for God consciousness, if we simply open ourselves up to all of the thoughts that come, what happens? The thoughts come. And what we find is that they just keep coming and keep coming. Now, as we speak all the time, the answer is not push them away. The answer is not berate yourself. The answer is also not, of course, latch yourself into one of them and carry it as far as it'll take you. So it's not, I have a thought about how beautiful, even just something beautiful. Oh, the arti was so beautiful. Great. But if I latch myself into it, it becomes the arti was so beautiful. God, I wish I could do that every night. Yet tomorrow I've got to leave. I wish I didn't have to leave. Oh my God, I didn't check in for my flight. I'm not going to get the right seat. Yeah, last time I remember I was sitting next to this really fat, stinky guy. And so you see, in not even 30 seconds, I've gone from the beauty of the arti to the fat, stinky guy on the plane next to me. This is the nature of what happens with thoughts. And this is why they carry us away. The moment we latch ourselves into one, we hook into a thought, you're somewhere else, as Pujya Swamiji always says, with no ticket, no visa. So we are aware of the fact that thoughts come. But that's very different than opening ourselves up to them like an open house to unwanted guests. Just because I don't kick the guests out or beat them to death doesn't mean that I'm going to hang up an open sign. And the same is true in our meditation. We should have a goal. We should have a target. And what the goal and the target is, whether you call it God consciousness, whether you call it enlightenment, whether you call it self-realization, whether you call it samadhi, nirvana. I mean, we could do this all night and come up with so many different terms that we use, but that's the goal. That's the target. And in order to experience that, I need to be focused. Whether I'm focused on my mantra, I'm focused on my breath, I'm focused on an image of the divine, I'm focused on a prayer. If I don't maintain that focus, I'm going to hook on to all of the thoughts that come and find myself carried away constantly. Meditation is simply about coming back to the truth of who we are, coming back to the real self, which means I need to be focused on removing that which is not real self. Focused on when I see an emotion. God, that made me so angry when this happened, and anger. And we let it go. We don't rehearse it. We don't hook into it. It's not self, not me. So that slowly we've got this distinction going between self, that space between the thoughts, that experience when I really am quiet for a split moment and I touch it, self, and not self, that which keeps coming, the thoughts, the emotions, the memories, the feelings. And when we can do that, that's when we're able to sustain the experience. So for God consciousness, yeah, that is the goal. It's not about just open myself up to everything that comes. We stay aware that this is the truth of who I am. And this is the self, and I'm going to just peel back layer after layer after layer. And then eventually we get to that point. Because remember, God consciousness is the same as self-realization. Two different terms for the same phenomenon. Because the awareness of the self, the realization of the self, is that I am divine. That's the realization I'm supposed to have. It's realization of the capital S self as divine. Not realization of me as a 5'3" white American female. Not that realization. The realization of me as consciousness, me as love, me as divinity, me as the one in the body as vehicle, me as the one noticing the journey it's on, the yatra it's on, the points along the way, but always removed from it, always still, always whole. And that's God consciousness. When we always talk about we've been created not just by the Creator, but of the Creator. Well, that self-realization is God consciousness. God consciousness is not about, well, how would God act in this situation? It's not about playing a role or a part, or can I, I've got to be a doctor in the school play. Can I get myself into doctor consciousness so I can do the role well? What would a doctor say or do in this moment? It's not about that. How can my consciousness merge with the divinity so that I am aware that who I am is divine, and lastly, that I am aware, therefore, that all of that with which I'm interacting is also divine. And that's very important, because a lot of times what happens on the spiritual path is I'm living in God consciousness, so you should be the one to take out the trash tonight. Because that would disrupt my God consciousness. I'm in God consciousness, so you should, massage my feet and take care of me and do the dishes. And God is not bounded or bordered by this body. So if I'm really having God consciousness, then it's the consciousness that you and I are one. It has to begin with the self, of course, because only then can I recognize it in others. But if I'm really living in God consciousness, it means I'm interacting with the world as God and as consciousness. And that is a goal. And it's a beautiful goal. And sadly, the human mind and the human ego are such rascals of their own sorts that if we just give them an open field on which to play, that's exactly what they'll do. And that's why we have meditation techniques. It's why we come to satsang. It's why we pray. It's why we sit at the feet of the gurus. It's why we do all of those things. to help us really get pinpointed and focused on that, so that our consciousness doesn't become just an open field for the play of ego, of mind, of illusion, and of ignorance.